Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to discuss this really important and exciting part of our world. And my particular portion of this world is drinking water. I'd also like to thank the FLC for this opportunity to talk to the region, or to talk to you about what we do with drinking water in our region. The Council of Governments actually has an agreement to work with the FLC to bring out technologies in the region and to look for different opportunities to collaborate. So a quick word about the region and the drinking water. A lot of people know about DC water and even Fairfax water or WSSC, but within the region we actually have 22 water utilities that range from less than 1,000 connections all the way up to serving over 3 million people. And in fact, around 4.5 million people rely on the Potomac River for our drinking water. However, we also have a significant amount of private wells, as you can see by the amount of white area. I'm going to start by going over both the consumer side of this and the water utility side of this, because I think it's really important to understand that consumers need data and information and technology just as much as the water utilities can, because one of our challenges is to get people to understand the value of water and why it is so important to invest in not only infrastructure, but the technologies and the other things that are needed to provide safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water. So we always start with, what do consumers want to know? I very specifically say consumers instead of customers, because customers, the vast majority of water sold in this country is actually not used for drinking water. It's used for other purposes. So I think it targets better when you can talk about consumers and not just customers. What everybody wants to know as the bottom line is the drinking water safe for my family? What is the utility doing? Every time there's a contamination event, people want to know, will this event happen here, or what is the utility doing to protect the water? And then the other side of it is, we are getting more and more questions and inquiries about how are we going to be resilient and how are we going to ensure a water supply in the long term, both for climate change but also growing population needs. Can I trust the experts is another really important question, and that's highly dependent on who people ask, and sometimes it is the water utilities, and sometimes it's academics, and sometimes it's government, and sometimes it's your mother-in-law. Where do I get information is always a challenge. Why is my water so expensive? And that gets back to the value of water and understanding what goes into producing safe and reliable drinking water. And what are my options? One of the most important things that consumers need to have is an idea that they can actually take an action or have some kind of control. And you'll see later on that that's part of the technologies that we look at. What the utilities need to know. They need to know that they have high-quality drinking water, and the better the source water going in, the better quality the drinking water going out. What's going to be regulated? Whether or not a water utility invests in a technology or a particular type of infrastructure is largely driven by trying to identify what's going to be the next thing regulated. Do customers trust us is a constant query, and that is variable on actually highly media-driven. How do we plan and pay for infrastructure, which gets back to the previous ones? Are we reliable and are we resilient? Does the distribution system work? Does the water we produce get to our customers? And if there is a interruption in service, like a water supply outage, or if there's a long-term drought, are we resilient and are we going to be able to maintain our water supply? And all these other challenges are my options myself as a water utility. I'm going to stop here and just briefly also mention how we work as a region on drinking water. I work for the Council of Governments, and our members are cities and counties throughout the Washington Metropolitan region. We also have drinking water and wastewater utilities within our membership as well, and we work very collaborative on a water supply emergency plan and drought plan, and then we do a significant number of activities above and beyond that. This next slide is talking about data, and drinking water utilities and all water utilities actually have a lot of data. Whether or not that data is applied to its best end use is a completely different part of the question. And I think the technology around understanding and gathering and collecting data is really important because, as Peter mentioned, more and more the media headlines over the last few years have been very dramatic water contamination events, so West Virginia chemical spill and the algae bloom in Toledo, as well as what's been happening in Flint. And it's actually having an effect on the way it's driving down customers and consumers' perceptions of drinking water safety, and that has potential long-term consequences for doing things like being able to invest in what we need to invest in over the next 30 years. So what are some of the sources of the data? Well, there's a lot of water quality data. They test water at the tap, they test it at the treatment plant, they test it at the distribution system. And some of that is for regulatory compliance, so they need to understand if they have E. coli or if there's enough chlorine to report back to the regulators. But there's also a lot of data that's gathered that gives you an overall trend on water quality, and it's also used to indicate potential contamination events. The water utilities in our region conduct a lot of research, and that's actually kind of one of our regional goals, is to be a place where people want to come to test products, market products, and do research. We have a diverse group of utilities who are all very invested in getting research and getting new technologies out. And DC Water probably has the most prominent effort of that, but it actually extends all the way down to our smallest utilities. And then customers and consumers are another really important source of data, and that is everything from usage, which is what people often think of, to things like what tracking and understanding what customer complaints and compliments are, to better understand where your water quality is and if it's meeting the needs of your consumers. So, as I mentioned, where do they get treatment? Where do they get this data? They get it at the treatment plant, they get it in the distribution system, and they get it from rivers and lakes and wells as they're pulling it into the system. The place where we actually need to probably get better about understanding and using data is within buildings. So homes, hospitals, and all sorts of other types of buildings actually, if you think about it, have their own distribution system. And what happens to water quality within that distribution system inside a building is something that needs to be understood. When do we traditionally put data out, especially with consumers? Well, there's the annual water quality reports that every utility puts out, and then utilities report their data to comply with rules and regulations. So they put it out and report it to their state agencies, who then report it to EPA, and you can look it up on databases. But what people really want to understand, and what the consumers really want to understand, is what we've mentioned in other pieces, which is real-time data. They want to know what the water quality is today, not what their water quality was last year, and not just what the water quality is as a snapshot in one point of time. They want to be able to see the trends over time. And how do we work with data, especially getting it out to the public? It's usually a publication like the annual water quality report or other types of compliance reporting online. But getting back to the previous area of real-time data, customers and consumers want their data on demand and when they want it in a place that's accessible. So that's one area where the need is there, and finding the best technologies to do it has not met up with that demand. So we spend a lot of time actually working with a lot of different consumers and publics in the region. And these are some of the things that we are using to try and move the region forward in getting consumers to understand, because the more they understand their water and can move towards getting that information how and when they want it, the better off we are as far as explaining water quality, but also making the case for investment. So one of the programs we have in the region is Tap It, and it seems like a simple technology to have an app, but it's been incredibly valuable. And this is used so we are able, so anybody can download the app and find a station or a place to fill up their water bottle anywhere throughout the region, and it's free and it's accessible. And it's important because it also allows people to understand how far the region goes and how far the water resources go in the region. The other side of data is to help consumers and customers take control. And so that part is, I think, really well exemplified by DC Water's new lead pipe map, where all of the people who live in the district can go on their map and look up if they have a lead service line, if it's been partially replaced or fully replaced. And this is a great tool for two reasons. One, it lets people understand, yes, I do, or no, I do not have a lead service line. But more so, it actually starts to give the consumer and the customer a level of control that they haven't had before, because they can look up their own data. Knowing water quality is still a bit of a challenge, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, being able to get real-time accurate data to customers remains a challenge. DC Water and several of the other utilities have moved to the automatic metering, where people can actually go online or go and use an app to find out how much water they're using. And this is great because it helps them give control over what they're using, but it also is a way of people, there's a leak alert, so people can understand if they have a leak and try and avoid some of those huge bills that people find out about and aren't happy. We also want to be able to make sure that any technology we're putting out there for consumers to use is usable for them. And I think one of the other challenges we face in the water sector overall is making sure that how we present data and how we use data is meeting the end user's needs. The last kind of challenge on this front with consumers and customers is to communicate. And when I say communicate, I mean a two-way communication back and forth between both parties, where consumers and customers can accurately report information and ask questions, and that information can be shared back and forth between the two. This slide is about a lot of the decisions we're making as a region, and I mentioned that one of the things we work on is water supply, and a lot of that comes from working together through our Source Water Collaborative on the Potomac River. And one of the things that we have implemented because of the chemical spill in West Virginia and the Toledo spill is completely redoing how we understand and talk about source water. So there's a new online cloud-based GIS tool to map out your watershed, and it integrates all of the data and puts it on a map so that we can do a better job in understanding what the potential sources of contamination are, doing the outreach with the places that we need to be able to say, hey, you know, can you notify us because your tank or your holding pond is within our source water protection area? And it's also, I think, in the long run, going to be a very useful tool that is for communicating with all sorts of different audiences, from state agencies to the public at large, to especially elected and public officials about this is what our source water area looks like. This is what we're doing, and this is where we need your help. So that kind of moves us through both water supply. It's part of our preparedness planning. And then when you integrate that with the things we're doing on climate change and long-term 30 and 40-year plans, it helps with our ability to do resilience. We have monitoring up and downstream, which we are trying to improve, and a plea for better sensors and better ways to uplink data, I think would be universally heralded by our utilities. But the other thing that's great about this source water planning tool is it's also a way to plan where we want to put additional monitors, how to do response plans, and how to do sampling plans. And long-term, we'll be able to also integrate some of our treatment data and water quality data in that so we can understand when we need to change water treatment and what is affecting some of the uses of chemicals, which is a big cost control measure. And then that combined with a recent study we did where we actually took, it's a resiliency study where we took risk mitigation and cost and benefit and actually costed out all of the investments we need to be resilient with our water supply in the region. All of this is done collaboratively, and we really try to do it within a risk management format. But this is really moving towards a much stronger use of data and a very applied use of data. So where are some of the opportunities? This is from a recent survey of the water sector that Black & Veatch did just this year. And it was specific to smart cities, but I think the topic areas actually speak in general about what water utilities are looking for and where their learning curve is. So they want to know more about smart infrastructure, and that gets back to sensors and monitoring and better AMI technology. I think leveraging data is really a huge piece of this. And like I said, the sharing of data, the analysis of data needs to kind of come up, and that is another area where tools would be greatly appreciated. Really understanding what customers and consumers want is important. I think the next 2 points of regional analysis and governance structures is important. Right now, there are limited ways that a group of water utilities with different states and different jurisdictions can use to fund and invest in different kinds of infrastructure, as well as doing the research and all of those. And I think that we need to move from doing a utility by utility analysis, which is the traditional way of doing it, to moving it up to a regional level. And that is because if we are going to make sustainable long-term investments, and we are looking at right now investments of over $1.3 billion, we have to be able to do it together. It's more than any single utility can handle. And the other side of it is security. So not only water security in general as far as water supply and water quality, but also the actual security of threats on the infrastructure and threats of cybersecurity to the different computer systems they use to run. So this kind of sums up some of those areas that we would really use both investment and research. We've got a good start with some of the technologies that we're using, but we really have a new ways to go. So water quality, which is real-time data, better monitoring in source water, better alarming. Material science is a huge emerging issue as far as pipe materials, but also materials within different parts of the water treatment plant. Working on the consumer side of the data, and then pulling all of this together to make smart investments so that our elected officials, our public officials, and all of the residents in our communities understand the value of water and what we're trying to do. And with that, I'll take any questions.